The August humidity pressed against the kitchen window like a living thing, matching the suffocating weight on my chest as I stared at the eviction notice. Under the flickering fluorescent light, the harsh glow illuminated the stack of unpaid bills beside my laptop, souvenirs from 3 months of Michael's broken promises, and my own desperate attempts to keep us afloat. I pulled my nurse's scrubs tighter around my shoulders, the faint smell of hospital disinfectant and cheap, instant coffee clinging to the fabric, like a familiar defeat. Just one more threat, I whispered to myself as I pulled up Michael's contact. My ex, and the reason my 16-year-old brother, Leo, was sleeping on a couch instead of in his own bedroom, 4 weeks behind on rent and suddenly unreachable when the utilities got shut off. I needed to remind him that we still existed, that we were drowning in the wake he'd left behind. The ancient air conditioner rattled and wheezed in the window, fighting a losing battle against the summer heat that made our cramped duplex feel like a pressure cooker. Pay what you owe. I'm not asking anymore. I hit send, then immediately followed with another message. My exhaustion making me reckless. My fury making me dangerous. I know about the Hayes money. Don't make me tell them where you've been hiding it. An empty threat. I knew nothing about Michael's new employers, beyond the name he'd dropped during our last screaming match 3 months ago, when he'd sworn he was about to come into serious money from some job for people called Hayes. Just another lie from a man who breathed them like air. I set my phone down on the chipped Formica counter and pressed my palms against my temples, willing away the migraine that had become my constant companion through double shifts and sleepless nights. The overhead light flickered once, twice, 3 times, another reminder of all the things in my life hanging by a thread, one unpaid bill away from darkness. That's when my phone buzzed, an unexpected response, cutting through the silent kitchen like a knife. My heart lurched as I grabbed for it, nearly knocking over my cold coffee in my haste. But instead of Michael's usual deflections and excuses, a single sentence appeared on my screen that turned my blood to ice. I'm outside. You have 30 seconds to open the door, Alexa. A different number. Not Michael's. Not anyone I knew. My hands started to shake as I stared at the message, trying to make sense of words that made no sense. Outside. How could they be outside? How did they know my name when I'd never given it? I moved toward the window on legs that suddenly felt disconnected from my body. My nurse's training screaming at me to check my pulse, to breathe, to think rationally. But rational thought fled when I pulled back the edge of the stained curtain and saw what waited. In the street below, 4 black SUVs, sleek and armored and impossibly expensive, lined up along the curb like a funeral procession. Their engines idled with a predatory purr I could feel through the floorboards. Men in dark suits stood at intervals, earpieces catching the streetlight, their stance suggesting weapons hidden beneath tailored jackets. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a wrong number. This was a military operation. 20 seconds. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly dropped it. Leo. I hissed toward the living room where my brother slept, but my voice came out strangled, useless. What was I supposed to tell him? That I'd accidentally threatened someone dangerous? That my empty bluff had summoned an army to our doorstep? I backed away from the window, my mind racing through impossible options. Call 911? And tell them that expensive cars were parked legally on a public street. That I was afraid of a text message? Hide? We were on the ground floor of a duplex with windows that didn't lock and a back door that opened. With a good shove, a shadow fell across the frosted glass of our front door. Tall, broad-shouldered, utterly still, waiting. My phone lit up one final time. 10 seconds. I'd prefer not to wake your neighbors, Miss Garcia. Or your brother. The mention of Leo, the confirmation that whoever this was knew about my 16-year-old brother sleeping 20 feet away shattered my paralysis into something sharp and desperate. I moved toward the door, my hand hovering over the deadbolt that suddenly seemed as substantial as tissue paper. 5 seconds. 4, 3. I opened the door. The porch light cast his face in harsh relief, sharp cheekbones, steel gray eyes that missed nothing, silver streaked, dark, hair swept back with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. His charcoal suit probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. Behind him, another man, larger, silent, watchful, stood with hands clasped and eyes that cataloged every escape route I didn't have. Alexa Garcia, he said, his voice a low rumble that made my name sound like a verdict, not a question, a statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of someone who held all the cards and knew it. I gripped the doorframe for support, my knees threatening to buckle beneath me. Who are you? His lips curved into something too cold to be called a smile, too calculated to suggest anything but danger. My name is Carl Hayes, he said, taking a single step forward that made me instinctively retreat. And I believe we need to discuss Michael Moore and the $3 million he stole from my organization. In that moment, I realized my desperate text hadn't just reached the wrong number. It had reached the exact wrong person in the entire city. The man Michael had robbed. The man whose name I'd carelessly dropped like a bargaining chip. The man who now stood at my door with a private army and the absolute certainty that I was involved in whatever Michael had done. And from the way his eyes moved past me into my modest home, cataloging Leo's backpack by the couch and my nursing textbooks on the coffee table, I understood with sickening clarity that Carl Hayes had come for answers I didn't have, and he wouldn't be leaving until he got them. Carl Hayes didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped across my threshold with the confidence of a man who owned every room he entered, his expensive shoes clicking against my worn linoleum like a judge's gavel. The bodyguard followed, closing the door behind them with a soft click that sounded unnervingly final. The ledger, Carl said, his steel gray eyes sweeping across my cramped kitchen, cataloging every detail with predatory precision. Where is it? I pressed my back against the counter, my mind scrambling to make sense of his words. I don't know what you're talking about. His jaw tightened, the only sign of impatience in his otherwise perfectly controlled demeanor. Michael Moore kept detailed records of every transaction, every route, every contact. $3 million doesn't disappear without documentation. He moved closer, and I could smell his cologne, cedar and something expensive that didn't belong in a place like this. He's gone to ground, Miss Garcia. But he wouldn't run without his insurance policy. And given that you were his emergency contact for 2 years, I'm betting he left it with you. Emergency contact? The words came out strangled. Michael and I broke up 3 months ago. I haven't seen him since. Since he walked out with my money, Carl finished, pulling a phone from his pocket. He swiped through several screens, then turned it toward me. Security footage showed Michael entering my duplex 2 weeks ago, carrying a black duffel bag, leaving 20 minutes later without it. You were working a double shift at County General, night rotation. He had a key. The blood drained from my face. I'd changed the locks after we broke up, but Michael had always been good at getting in where he wasn't wanted. I don't have any ledger. I don't have anything of his. Then we have a problem, Carl said softly. And somehow that quiet tone was more terrifying than if he'd shouted. He glanced toward the living room where Leo's blanket-covered form shifted on the couch. Because until I recover what's mine, you and your brother are liabilities I can't afford to leave unaccounted for. He's 16, I whispered, moving instinctively between Carl and the doorway to the living room. He has nothing to do with this. He doesn't even know Michael. Carl's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, reassessment. Then I suggest you help me find that ledger, Miss Garcia, for both your sakes. Carl made a decision in the span of a heartbeat. His phone was already at his ear, his voice dropping to rapid instructions in a language I didn't recognize. The bodyguard Victor, I heard Carl call him, moved to the window, speaking quietly into his own earpiece. Pack essentials for 72 hours, Carl said, turning back to me. You and your brother, 5 minutes. We're not going anywhere with you. I tried to sound firm, but my voice shook. I told you, I don't have what you're looking for. I believe you. His words shocked me into silence. But that won't matter to the Sinaloa cartel when they come looking for their cut of Michael's take, or to the FBI when they trace his digital footprint back to this address. He checked his watch with the same casual precision he probably used before ordering someone's execution. Michael didn't just steal from me, Miss Garcia. He stole from people who make me look merciful by comparison, and he made sure all roads lead here. The implication hit me like a physical blow. He framed me comprehensively. Carl's jaw tightened. Your nursing credentials have been used to access 3 of my medical facilities. In the past month, security footage shows someone in scrubs, face obscured, downloading patient records and medication inventories. The timestamps match your off-duty hours precisely. My hand flew to my mouth. I was home. I was sleeping, or with Leo, or, I know. Something in his tone made me look up sharply. Your car was in your driveway. Your phone pinged from this location. Your work badge never left your locker at County General. He stepped closer, and for the first time, I saw something besides cold calculation in those gray eyes. Michael is thorough. He built you a perfect prison. The only question is whether you'll let me get you out before the walls close in. A sound from the living room made us both turn. Leo stood in the doorway, sleep rumpled and confused. His 16-year-old frame tensed for flight or fight. Alexa, what's going on? I looked at my baby brother, the kid I'd raised since our parents died. The reason I worked doubles and ate ramen and counted every penny, and made the only choice I had. Pack your bag, Leo. We're leaving. Carl nodded once, approval flickering across his features. Smart woman. 20 minutes later, we were in the back of an armored SUV. The city lights blurring past tinted windows as we headed toward whatever fortress Carl Hayes called home. Carl's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building I'd only ever seen from street level. The kind of place where doormen wore better suits than most CEOs. Leo pressed his face against the SUV window as we descended into a private, underground garage, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and reluctant awe. The elevator required both a keycard and a fingerprint scan. As we ascended in silence, I caught our reflection in the polished brass doors. Leo, clutching his backpack like a life preserver, me still in my wrinkled scrubs, and Carl Hayes standing between us and the world with the absolute certainty of a man who controlled both. The doors opened onto a space that redefined my understanding of wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like a kingdom laid out for inspection. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my car. Original artwork I'd only seen in museum catalogs during my community college art history class. A woman in her 50s appeared from a side hallway, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant twist. Mr. Hayes, the guest rooms are prepared. Thank you, Sarah. Carl gestured toward Leo. Make sure he has everything he needs. Food, clothes, whatever he asks for. Leo looked at me uncertain. I squeezed his shoulder. It's okay. Go. After they disappeared, Carl led me to a study dominated by a massive desk and multiple computer monitors. He sat down, fingers moving across a keyboard with practiced efficiency, then turned one of the screens toward me. This is what Michael built, he said quietly. I watched in growing horror as he pulled up file after file. My nursing license number linked to pharmaceutical thefts at 3 different facilities. My digital signature on medication disposal forms I'd never seen. Security camera footage showing someone in my exact scrubs. My build, my hair color, entering restricted areas. Bank transfers from offshore accounts to a checking account that had my name. My social security number, but an address I'd never lived at. He opened accounts in your name, Carl continued, pulling up more documents. Used your credentials to access controlled substances. Created a paper trail that makes you look like his partner. He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. If the D raids your duplex tomorrow, they'll find exactly what Michael wants them to find. My legs gave out. I sank into the leather chair beside his desk, my hands shaking so badly I had to clasp them together. How long has he been doing this? 6 months. Since before you even broke up with him. Carl's voice carried something that might have been sympathy if it came from anyone else. You weren't his girlfriend, Alexa. You were his exit strategy. I spent the first night in Carl's fortress, staring at the ceiling of a guest room, larger than my entire duplex, my mind churning through 6 months of memories now poisoned by the truth. Every late night, Michael had insisted on driving me to work. Every time he'd asked about my schedule, my patience, my access codes, every moment I'd thought was love had been reconnaissance. Morning came, with Sarah bringing coffee and clothes that actually fit. Someone had taken my measurements while I'd slept apparently. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt numb. Carl found me in his study 2 hours later, surrounded by printouts of Michael's fabricated evidence. I'd been awake since dawn, my nurse's training kicking in as I cataloged every detail, every time stamp, every inconsistency. You're looking at this wrong, I said, without preamble, when he entered. This medication log hydromorphone, supposedly signed out under my credentials, on March 15th, but County General switched to a digital-only system on March 1st. Paper logs weren't even available. Carl moved to stand beside me, studying the document with renewed interest. You're certain? I wrote the training manual for the new system. I pulled up another file on his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard with the same confidence. I used starting IVs in chaotic ERS, and this transfer record. It lists me accessing the pharmacy at 2:40 a.m., but the nursing station requires a supervisor override after midnight. There'd be a second signature. There isn't one. Something shifted in Carl's expression, the way a chess player looks when they realize their opponent actually knows the game. How many other discrepancies can you find? Give me 4 hours and full access to your files. He studied me for a long moment, those steel gray eyes calculating odds and outcomes. Then he pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, and slid it across the desk to me. You have full system access. Anything you need, ask Sarah or Victor. I stared at the device, understanding what he was really offering. Trust, or at least, the appearance of it. Why? I asked. You could have experts do this. People who actually work for you. I have experts, Carl said, his voice carrying an edge of something that might have been respect. But they don't know how a hospital pharmacy actually operates at 3 a.m. on a Saturday. They don't know which protocols can't be faked. He paused. You do, and more importantly, you want to burn him as badly as I do. He wasn't wrong. I picked up the phone. 4 hours. Then we talk about how to find Michael. Carl's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Now you're thinking like someone who survives in my world, Miss Garcia. 3 days of dismantling. Michael's lies had transformed me from victim to strategist. I'd found 17 inconsistencies in his fabricated evidence, enough to prove my innocence to anyone who looked closely. But as Carl reminded me over dinner on the third night, his voice, low and certain, proving innocence wasn't the same as ensuring survival. Michael knows his frame is weakening, Carl said, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal tumbler. He'll run further, deeper. Or worse, he'll approach the Sinaloa cartel with what he still has. Offer them your location as a consolation prize. Leo had already gone to bed, finally relaxed enough in this gilded cage to sleep through the night. I envied him that innocence, even as I felt it slipping further from my own grasp. So we make him come to us, I said, the words tasting like ash and necessity. Carl's eyes met mine across the table, searching for hesitation. He wouldn't find. You understand what I'm asking. I'm bait. I took a sip of wine. I couldn't taste. The scared ex-girlfriend reaching out, desperate to reconcile, to warn him that people are asking questions. He won't trust it immediately. Carl, set down his glass with deliberate precision. He's paranoid by now, jumping at shadows. We'll need to make it convincing. Over the next 2 hours, we crafted the message with surgical care. A text from my original number, Carl's tech specialist, a woman named Chen, with cold eyes and colder efficiency, had retrieved it from my duplex before the feds could seize it. The message was perfect in its desperation. Michael, please. FBI came to County General asking about me. About us. I'm scared. I need to see you. I need to know this wasn't all a lie. He'll want a public place, Carl said, watching Chen attach something smaller than a button to the inside seam of my jacket. Somewhere he can see you coming. Confirm you're alone. The Riverside Cafe, I suggested, remembering Michael's paranoia manifesting as careful patterns. He took me there on our first date. Corner booth, view of both entrances. He always said it was the safest place in the city. Carl nodded slowly, something almost like admiration crossing his features. You're learning. I'm surviving, I corrected, feeling the weight of the tracker against my ribs like a second heartbeat. Chen stepped back, satisfied with her work. The device has a 12-hour battery and a 2-mile range. If anything goes wrong, Victor will be 3 tables away, Carl interrupted. You won't be alone, Alexa. I hit send before I could reconsider, watching the message disappear into the digital void. Somewhere out there, Michael's phone would light up with my desperate plea, and he'd have to decide whether his paranoia outweighed his arrogance. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed with his reply. Tomorrow, noon, come alone or I disappear forever. Michael changed the location 3 times in 6 hours, his paranoia spiraling with each text. The final message came at dawn. Pier 7 Shipping Yard, PM. I'll know if you bring anyone. Carl's jaw tightened as he read it over my shoulder. It's a trap. Everything's a trap, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. The question is, whose? The shipping yard was a graveyard of rusted containers and broken dreams, the kind of place where screams got swallowed by the wind off the water. Victor dropped me to blocks away. His last words, a quiet reassurance, that felt more like a threat to anyone who might harm me. We're close. Michael emerged from behind a container marked with faded Mandarin characters, looking nothing like the man I'd thought I loved. Thinner, harder, eyes darting like a cornered animal. But his smile was the same charming, practiced, lethal in its familiarity. Alexa. He opened his arms like we were meeting for coffee, not standing in the ruins of everything he'd destroyed. God, I've missed you. Where's the ledger, Michael? I stayed out of reach, every nerve screaming danger. His smile faltered. That's what you came here to ask. After everything you did to me. The words came out cold, clinical, nothing like the desperate woman from my texts, the fake accounts, the stolen credentials, the frame job that would have sent me to federal prison. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or calculation. You were never supposed to get caught. I made sure. You made sure I'd take the fall if you did. I took a step forward, catching movement in my peripheral vision. Not Victor. Wrong direction, wrong formation. Who else did you sell to, Michael? He followed my gaze, and his expression cracked. Alexa, you need to leave, right now. 3 SUVs rolled into the yard, black like Carl's, but with different plates, different energy. The doors opened in synchronized precision, and men emerged with weapons already drawn. Not Carl's people, the rival cartel. You're wearing a wire, Michael hissed, backing toward the water. You brought Hayes here, you stupid. I brought myself, I interrupted, my hand moving to the tracker at my ribs. The signal it sent wasn't just location, it was confirmation. Now, and I chose my side. The shipping yard exploded into chaos as Carl's men emerged from every shadow, every container, every angle Michael hadn't considered. But I was already moving, diving behind a pallet as gunfire shattered the afternoon into violence and necessity. Through the smoke and sound, I saw Carl appear like a force of nature, his gun raised and his focus absolute. And I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. The penthouse felt different when I returned 3 hours later, stripped of the blood and cordite that had painted the shipping yard in shades of finality. Leo was at the kitchen island with Sarah, laughing over something on his phone, blissfully unaware of how close he'd come to losing the only family he had left. Carl found me on the terrace, staring out at a city that looked different now, not threatening, but conquerable. He'd changed his suit, but I could still see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he moved that suggested injuries he'd never acknowledge. "Michael's alive," he said, without preamble, joining me at the railing. "Barely. The Sinaloa cartel isn't as forgiving as I am." "And the ledger?" "Recovered, along with enough evidence to bury his operation and clear your name completely." He paused, studying my profile. "The FBI will receive an anonymous package tomorrow. By next week, you'll be a footnote in a case that leads nowhere near you." I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow, like I'd been carved out and reconstructed from different materials. "So Leo and I can go home." "You could." Carl's voice carried something I couldn't quite name. "Back to your duplex with the broken air conditioning and the eviction notices. Back to double shifts and counting pennies." He turned to face me fully. "Or you could stay." "As what?" "A prisoner with better accommodations." "As my operations manager." He said it like he was offering me coffee. "Not a position in a criminal empire." Your instincts at that shipping yard, reading Michael's tells, identifying the cartel's presence before anyone else, signaling my team at the exact right moment. That's not something I can train. That's survival intelligence. I laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "I'm a nurse, Carl. I save lives, I don't." "You saved your own life today, and your brother's, and mine." If we're being honest, his steel gray eyes held mine with uncomfortable intensity. "I've spent 20 years building this organization, with men who serve out of fear or greed. What I'm offering you is partnership, a seat at the table, the kind of power that ensures no one, not Michael, not the cartels, not anyone, can ever make you a victim again." The city sprawled below us, glittering with possibility and danger in equal measure. I thought about Leo's laughter in the kitchen, genuine for the first time in months, about the way Carl's men had moved to protect me without hesitation at the shipping yard, about the woman I'd become in 72 hours, harder, sharper, unwilling to apologize for taking up space. "What about Leo?" I asked, and we both knew I'd already made my decision. "He stays in school, private, secure, the best education money can buy. No one touches him, ever." Carl's voice carried the weight of an oath. "That's non-negotiable." I extended my hand, and he took it, his grip warm and certain, and nothing like the desperate grasp of a drowning woman reaching for a life preserver. This was an alliance, a compact between equals, who'd found each other in the wreckage of someone else's betrayal. "I'll need an office," I said, "and access to your financial systems. If I'm going to manage operations, I need to understand every moving piece." Carl's smile was sharp with approval and something that might have been pride. "Welcome to the Empire, Alexa. Let me show you your kingdom." As we walked back inside, past Leo's easy laughter and Sarah's knowing look, I caught my reflection in the terrace glass. The exhausted nurse in wrinkled scrubs was gone. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, but was beginning to understand, a woman who'd stopped apologizing for surviving and started demanding the world make room for her ascent. Michael had tried to build me a prison. Instead, he'd forged me into something far more dangerous than he'd ever been. A queen who'd learned to play the game. And this time, I was playing to win.